So we're in a summer series, What is God Like? And today is part 4, which is the watching Father, is the theme we're going to talk about today. And, excuse me, his coming was to explain to us what God was like. That's not the only reason he came, but that was a big one. He would do that by how he lived his life, by the words he spoke, the things that he did. And one of the gifts that Jesus had and displayed was his teaching gift. He was a great storyteller. And we use this term parable to describe the stories that he told. And he wanted us to understand what God was like, because there was a lot of confusion. There was confusion in that day, and there's confusion today. And so we are looking at one of those stories. It's a long story in 3 parts in Luke chapter 15. Luke was a physician, a Gentile, which is unusual to have been someone who wrote something for the New Testament. We believe it was Peter who supplied the information. And in chapter 15, about halfway through the book, we have this particular parable, this story. And today, we're in the 3rd part of the long parable, and it begins this way. There was a man who had 2 sons. So I love the way Jesus teaches, because this is his audience there. And he's taking something that's very common, everybody could connect to, but also everybody had a context. And so it's important for us to understand that there's a culture out here that's seeing, hearing what Jesus is saying and doing through their context, through their perspective. So he is introduced in the first part, a shepherd who had 100 sheep. Now, what they heard was, oh, here's a shepherd. He's got 100 sheep. That shepherd values those sheep. To that shepherd, those sheep were very important. Then there was a woman who had 10 coins. And they would automatically connect and say, oh, yeah, to that woman, those 10 coins were very important. Now we come to a father who has 2 sons. And in this culture, at this time, this is the most power possible. And when I say power, it doesn't mean authority to tell people what to do. It means power meaning investment, devotion, commitment, love. There was no greater than what this father would have in his children, and the importance of those children to him, to their future, to his future. It's huge. So when they heard this, immediately they're connecting to something that's really powerful and profound. So, here where I am. Let's read this. Luke 15, 11 through 13. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, his younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land. The father, and I have this in my notes, so I've got to be careful that I make sure that I always put in my notes what you have in your notes that I'm supposed to say so you can fill in the blanks. And if you don't raise your hand if I've missed anything. So far I've been pretty good about this. This is all new for me, doing this whole thing. But actually I did the high value, that thing. But here's the one that's new. The younger son did something unthinkable. Okay, cultural context again. Father, 2 sons. What's the assumption? These sons are going to be dutiful, responsible, and take care of the business that they have in this very prosperous home and estate. The unthinkable is that the younger son will say to his father, I want my share of the estate now, basically saying to his father, I can't wait till you're dead. I've got to have it now. In fact, it'd be best if you just died, and then I'd get it and nobody'd feel bad about the whole thing. And so he rejected and dishonored his father. Now, that's unthinkable. In this culture, at this time, that's shock value. It's like, yikes. Now their attention has gone up because we've got a father heavily invested in the children, and now we got one of them, a younger son, who's doing exactly the wrong thing. Totally the wrong thing. So I want to tell this story. I'm willing to go out on a limb on this. You got to be careful when you teach the Bible that you don't teach your own version of the Bible. You know, you're supposed to stay accurate to what the Bible says, okay? On the other hand, we're supposed to understand the cultural context so we can, as it were, add the color to what is being said that was heard by those people. And that means the culture. That means understanding, interpreting. That means filling in between the lines. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that a lot this morning. So I'm warning you ahead of time. If any of you are, really super linear, analytical, just tell me exactly what it said and don't tell me nothing else, you're going to be offended. If you're like me and love all of the other color stuff, you're going to love this. So we'll find out who you are today. Are we all good? Okay. So this is the way I see this. I'm going to lay it out for you as though I am a director, producer, writer of a movie. And this is the way I would stage it. This home sits on a bit of a rise, and around it are the fields and the flock. It's a very prosperous home. And the home, as you come out of the home, and I'm looking south, as you come out of the home south, there's like a porch coming out the front door, and then off of that porch is like a road. We would call it our driveway. It goes all the way down to the main road that crosses this particular road driveway. That's not in here. You just hear what I'm saying? I'm imagining this to put a context. I don't know what they heard, but this is what I hear. So I'm sharing it with you. So when the father says goodbye to his youngest son, he says goodbye to him out there on that front porch where the young man has all of his goods and where he is an animal, donkey, burro, whatever, and he's loaded up, kind of like us in a car and the whole thing, loaded up, and he's ready to take off, and he leaves. He goes down that long road driveway to the main road, makes a right, and heads west and goes to a distant country. And as he goes, the father watches him. He watches him go until he's out of sight. And he still stays there, standing there, trying to absorb the impact of what has just happened. Trying to understand why his younger son would make the choices he's made and now leave. Trying to hold himself back from not just running after him and talking sense into him. You ever tried to do that to anybody? Come on, you have to. Does it ever work? No. Most of the time, it just made things messy. So he refrained from doing that, which took a lot of courage, by the way. Now, once his son left, something remarkable happened. And during that time, which we would call a time between times, this space opened up. And during that time, we have this understanding that the Father is waiting, but he's also watching, and he's not passive. He is doing something. What did the shepherd do? He ran after the sheep, tried to find it. What did the woman do with her coin? She turned the house upside down to find the coin. Is this father then all of a sudden not like those two and just doesn't care? Is he indifferent? No, he's not. He does care. He is not indifferent. Now, I think I got out of sequence here. And when the son returns, did I say this? While the son was still a long way off, his father saw him. I don't think I put that in there yet, did I? I needed to. Okay. This is a key to what I'm trying to give you. Because when the son returns, the father sees him at a long way off. Now, what are the possibilities? Oh, he just happened to be out on the front porch, looked out there, and thought, I'll just check it out. And he saw his son, and went, wow! And he had totally forgot him, didn't care about him, and then all of a sudden he sees him. You think so? I don't. It doesn't square with the rest of the parable. To me, that father has been watching for that son since that son left. There has not been any indifference. There has not been any less love or commitment to that son. So how do you live in a time between times? How do you live when the son leaves before he comes back? What do you do during that time? That's where addictions come into our life. That's where we fill those holes by comforting ourselves with addictions. I'm going to suggest to you there's an alternate that we can do that really has incredible power and help in our lives. And I like this, heard this years ago. Whenever these kind of times open up, we can either get bitter or better. There's no sitting on the fence. There's too much power that has been released. And when that happens, you're either going to get bitter or you're going to get better. And you get to have the choice. You get bitter, you become more and more of a victim. You become more and more negative. You become more and more oriented to a negative world that's unfair to you, yada, yada, yada. You get better, you learn about grace. You learn about mercy. You have a different sense of foundation. So, what's this guy do? Now, one of the things we know about a good man who is Jewish, has two sons, there are certain things that this man does on a regular basis. He goes to church. Actually, he goes to the synagogue, and he honors the Sabbath, because that's part of the Old Testament law. So we know he does that, right? I mean, we're all on the same page? Okay. Another thing he does is he prays 3 times a day. That's understood. Morning, afternoon, and night, he would pray. Down the block and over on the lake, about half a block away, we have a couple that lived there for about 5 years. He was born Jewish. His parents live in Israel. He lived in Israel. He married a Moroccan woman who's a convert to Judaism, and they live down the street from us. And soon I've connected with them and become friends and really enjoy them, Bruce and Rosie. I love it. They recently left with a small group out of their synagogue, because the synagogue was getting too political and they weren't focusing on spiritual things. Now, these are Jewish people of the Jewish faith who want the spiritual connection. Isn't that great? I mean, I was really, and he's kind of the leader guy, and he laughingly calls himself a rabbi, and his wife corrects him. And she looked at me last time we were together, and she says, you do realize Bruce not a rabbi. I said, yeah, I get that. But hey, it's fun anyway. Let's make him a rabbi. I don't know. Hopefully no rabbis within hearing could be offended by that. I was out doing one of my morning walks, and I came across Rosa. She was walking their little dog. First and last time I've ever seen her on the road, and I'm on the road a lot. And we commented about how beautiful the morning it was, just gorgeous. And she said, I love to walk and say my prayers. I love that. I wonder what her prayers were. I wonder how far back they go. I wonder where in the Old Testament, maybe in Psalms or wherever, the origin of her prayers. What were the prayers? Now, if you'd asked me, I would say, I love to walk and pray. Anybody else? Because prayer to me is a conversation. So it's not necessarily me praying a memorized prayer as much as it's me having a dialogue with God. I'll sometimes pray those kind of prayers. But for her, that was the substance of her prayer life. Wow, I like this. This is so fun. A person of the Jewish faith praying to the same God I pray to. And man, this is going to be fun getting to know these folks. So about 10 years ago, we had a young man in the church, and his life was not going the way he wanted. He was really struggling. He drifted away. And he came back about 9 months later, and he wanted to see me. So he came and said, I just have to tell you, my life has changed. And it was because somebody gave me a book of prayers, and I've been praying those prayers. Is that crazy? Can that change your life? I mean, really? Come on. Really? I mean, this guy was a different guy. This kid was a different kid. He was just vibrant. And he had been so beat down and beat up. And he says, from praying these prayers. What a crazy thing. And I'm standing there going, okay. That and what else? You mean prayer by itself could bring about all of that? Yeah. Yeah. Is that amazing or what? Okay, so my thesis is that this father is praying 3 times a day. Now, where's he praying? I believe he's praying out there on that front porch, looking down that road, on down there, and he's praying for his son and for his son to come home. But in the meantime, he's praying for his safety and his blessing, and he is focused. Now, I believe that because it fits within the context of the first 2 parts of the parable, the shepherd and the woman, and my own experience. It's dangerous to project what it's like for you into something on one hand. On the other, if this teaching is to impact us personally, we have to personally identify with it. We have to understand it viscerally. We have to get into the passion and the emotion of it. And for me, I lived it. And I can tell you what it was like, and it wasn't pleasant. It was very, very painful. And one of the things about the difficult times, if you don't have one, you'll get a good prayer life. We have friends who have a couple of teenagers that are going through driver's training. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, you're going to have a great benefit because your prayer life is going to grow significantly through this time. I mean, on every level I know of. I mean, talk about a rite of passage in our lives. So during these difficult times, it's good to add prayer to your life. One of the things that happens in the difficult times is there's energy, there's power that comes, there's momentum in your life that, if you will allow it, will take you to God. It will move you to God. It will help you focus on God. When we were in Totem Lake, our church down there, there was a family in the church, the young family. The 8-year-old son at the time had leukemia, and had leukemia for 2 years. And I was walking across the foyer during a service at one point. No one else was in the foyer. But this woman happened to come through, and our paths crossed, and she stopped me. And she said to me, Lee, I want to talk to you for just a minute. I've been looking forward to this. I know you'll understand. And I thought, okay. She said, I hate with everything in me what has happened to my son. I would gladly take the leukemia myself and go through the suffering he's been going through for the last 2 years. I hate it. Is that a parent? That's how parents are. They'll rather do it themselves than watch their kids go through it. Nothing worse for a parent than watching their child suffer. Then she stopped and looked at me and she said, but I can tell you, I would never trade the gifts and blessings that have come to me through these last 2 years. I am a different person because of it. Now, did I expect to hear the second part? No. Was it holy ground? It was like this clear bubble comes over you. Have you ever been in one of those times where it's like time stops and you're on holy ground and you go, man, I just heard something that is so amazing. Why? This woman sought God. This woman turned her heart to God. She didn't get bitter. She could have been, but she chose to seek God, not be bitter. And the result was blessing. Hebrews 11:6. It is impossible to please God apart from faith. And why? Because anyone who wants to approach God and must believe both that he exists and that he cares enough to respond to those who seek him. So if we turn to God, will he respond? And in some of the other language, he will reward those who seek him. Do you believe that? There's never more fertile soil in your life than the time between times, because it's most difficult. And the soil is churned up, and it takes the seed well, and it allows us to change. Now, one of the great things about those times is that we can make a habit of prayer. If you don't pray and don't have prayers, that's a good time to establish a habit. And it's a good time to stop some habits too. As far as making that transition, if you don't have a habit of prayer or prayers, I encourage you, it's kind of like, my hope is that in some way, this encouragement will be to you a confirmation, kind of a proper awakening of saying, yeah, I've been hearing that. I know that's what I want to do. I want to make prayer a more consistent part of my life. So, okay, we got a great service this morning. I'm really encouraged where we're going to go now, because we're going to make some applications about prayer. And the first one will have to do with a mission that we've been on for 3 years and is 4.5 years ahead of us also. It's about preparing the house. Remember that? Preparing the house for our future, for the people God will send us, and for those he will send us to. And we've been actively doing that. One of the gifts that God gave us a year and a half ago was Alpha. Alpha was this excellent gift that helps us do all three. Helps us prepare the church for the future, helps us prepare the church for those God is going to send us, and helps us prepare ourselves for those we're going to be sent to. So Alpha is coming up again this fall in September. The engine of Alpha, what's going to make Alpha successful is, can you guess? Well, it's you doing the right thing. You know, that was supposed to be a joke. Prayer. Prayer is going to make it successful. You can have a program that has all the elements and no prayer. You can have a program that has, kind of limps, but there's prayer, it can fly. Prayer makes the difference. And so within the Alpha leadership team, we have a prayer facilitator, a point person, Cynthia Wood. And she has chosen a video, which we're now going to watch, about prayer. And then she's going to encourage you to be part of praying for Alpha.